Hello everybody, how you doing? Thanks for tuning in to this modular pilot Q&A. Hope you've all had a good weekend and all is fine. Well, we'll get straight into it then. By the way, can everyone hear me all right? Just feel free to drop me a message if you've got any questions or anything like that. So yeah, I'll just get straight into it then. So a few people have sent me a couple of questions as during the week. So I just thought I'd have a look at some of them and try and give some of the responses back, by the way. And yeah, as I say, if any of you have got any questions that you would like to ask, just fire on in the live chat and then I'll get to them as soon as possible. So yeah, one of the questions that I had that came up here was, why didn't I start my flight training sooner? It's no secret that I'm well into my 30s now. Hey Andy, how's it going? Yeah, so I guess, why didn't I start sooner? Well, when I finished uni at 22, I then got my PPL for free. At the time, I was then thinking of then doing an integrated course, but unfortunately, I just couldn't afford it, and I didn't really want to ask my parents for more money. As are we doing, George? Right? Yeah, I didn't really want to ask my parents for any more money, as they'd already forked out enough to try and help me get through uni. So I was lucky enough to land a graduate job in engineering. How are we doing? Yeah, I was pretty happy with that. And the idea I had at the time was I would just continue with the engineering side of things and yeah, just go for it. Hey, how are we doing? And that was fine. Pretty happy with my engineering career, and I'd fly whenever I could. But sometimes I just didn't have the money to do so. Hey, Michael. And yes, there would be gaps. Sometimes I'd go a couple of years without flying. Sometimes I'd do a bit more if I had a bit more cash. And then, unfortunately, the oil price collapsed probably around about 5 years ago. My job was potentially going to come up for at risk. I was working in the oil and gas industry. And that gave me the wake-up call that I needed. Because I just thought, you know what? There's no point just cruising through and just sitting through life. What's the point? So yeah, I went ahead, made a start, dusted off my PPL, which at the time had lapsed, and then went straight in to my hour building, and then yeah, the rest was history. It took me about 12 months or so to get all the way through. So I've got a question here from Andy. Would doing CPL MEIR with a smaller FTO have an impact on getting first job with an airline? So absolutely not. I did my CPL with West Air in Blackpool, and I was one of the first CPL students that they had at the time. The quality of the training was really good at West Air, so I was lucky enough to get the first time pass. I had a good report from the flying school. So no, it didn't give me any issues whatsoever when I came to applying for jobs. And in fact, all the airline assessments that I went to didn't even mention it. Yes, central flight training at Chain Hill is great. It's great. I did my PPN there, and the guys, my PBN there, and the guys there have been super helpful. Can everyone hear me all right, by the way? I've got a new mic, so just not sure if it's coming through okay. Just message if you can't quite get the sound. So the next one is what was my ATPL study routine and the modules? Hey Talia, hi Michael. Yeah, so what did I do? So yeah, for my ATPLs, I started them in around about August time, and yeah, 1st of August, and then did my first exams early November for the first module. It was with CATS, so we had like 4 days of brush up at the time. I'll step a little bit closer to the mic, then hopefully that makes it on a little bit better. Yeah, so it was with CATS, did brush up for over a 4-day period, and then went straight into my first module. So what, August, September, October, November, around about 4 months for the first module, or 3 months, because I did it at the start of November. And yeah, fine. And then from there, I then took about 3 months for the next module. And then finally from that one, I then did 2 months for the final module. But it was just the distribution of the subjects which made it just slightly, yeah, more challenging in certain phases. So the first phase was quite heavy, and the subjects were also quite information heavy, like MET and operational procedures and all that sort of thing. So yeah, the first one took 4 months, second one 3 months, and the final one 2 months. And also, I guess as you're going along, you are starting to get a little bit, well, you're becoming more comfortable and more adapt to learning and picking up new information. The first module is definitely trying to figure out how to get yourself to revise and how to get yourself to start working again and all the rest. So yeah, I hope that answers that question. Guys, got any questions? Feel free to pipe up and shout. So the next one was, how much brush up was there? So with cats, I specifically picked cats because I didn't have a lot of annual leave days, so I just had to be quite clever, or try to be quite efficient, trying to figure out, hey Wayne, how you doing? Trying to figure out how I could get all my flight training done within the amount of holiday that I had. So I just went, picked cats because it was 4-day brush up. But then I was working already in a technical background. I was working as a chartered engineer in the oil and gas industry. So I felt reasonably confident I should be okay with the technical subjects. And it wasn't too much of an issue with there. So I kind of took the bias, less intensive brush ups, but more time for myself to work by myself. Again, just trying to be efficient with the holidays. And yeah, it was 4 days for each brush up, which was completely fine. How intense was the maths? It wasn't too bad, actually. I think the level that they pitch it at is GCSE maths, and as long as you can do that, you're generally okay. It's just a standard multiplication, division, and nothing else more than that. It's just, they kind of complicate it by giving you all these, different formulas that you have to remember, and how to figure out this and where you get this number from and that. But the key one is, if you're well practiced, then it's fairly straightforward and quite easy to come by. Guys, thanks everyone who's joining the stream for the first time and asking all the great questions. Don't forget, if you like the content, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, as I'll be doing much more. And yeah, if there's any topics that you want covering, just please shout. Right, so what was my ATPL routine like and technique for the ATPLs? Thanks for watching the videos. So yeah, the revision routine, I was a little bit extreme in that I basically would set my alarm for about 4:30 in the morning because I was working as well, and I had to balance that. So I'll do, with breaks, maybe 2.5, 3 hours before work, get up, go to work, and then at lunchtime I'd have a 45-minute lunch break. So once I made or heated up my lunch, or when I got my sandwich, probably left with about half an hour, put my headphones in, and then do another half an hour of something. It was the really good thing was all the information was on the iPad. So I could, if I was doing question bank, I could do it on my iPad, or if I was reading, I could just do it on my iPad. And then when I get home, I'll try and do another half an hour, whatever I could. And then, early one for bed. And then the next day, repeat. And then at the weekends, I'll go and do hour building. And then and then later on after that, I'll then go and do my CPL and MEIR courses. In terms of the exact technique, I mean, everyone tends to find their own rhythm and their own way of doing it. I guess what worked well for me was was just working in like 40-minute intervals. So I'd switch everything off, no phone, no nothing, everything off for 40 minutes at the time. And then when 40 minutes was up, I'd give myself a bit of a break. And I just found I just managed to get myself immersed and just go for it a lot better. I hope that answers that question. And yeah, thanks for watching the Biggers. Bigger FTOs seem to be bang on about having great links to the airlines. Would you say they're just as recognized as a standalone applicant? I don't know about that. There's certainly certain FTOs have got links with certain airlines. Absolutely, I can't dispute that. But I don't think just because you go to a big FTO, you're guaranteed a job. So I went to a certain airlines assessment in the UK, and I was sat there before the first stage of the assessment. I think it was a group exercise or something, and I was just chatting to some of the guys, and some of the people that were in the assessment had come from the big school, and I said, well, did they find you, did they get you this assessment? And the guys were like, no, we had to work for the assessment or apply for the assessment ourselves. And that I guess that showed to me at the time that it was a fairly level playing field, whether or not you went to a large school or you went to a smaller school, as I had finished in some cases much later than they had, but managed to get the the assessment much quicker. So it just depends on the airline that you're applying for. I know with certain airlines, if you haven't been to a particular school, they won't even look at you, but that's not the prevailing direction. It's few and far between. Generally, it's, you know, everyone is near enough open to the same opportunities. And I don't want to mention any names of particular airlines, but if you go online before COVID-19 crisis, you'd see that a lot of the big airlines were starting to open up their recruitment to modular people. Okay, one or two of them were requesting that you redo the MCC course, but the opportunity was certainly open on that one. Absolutely, and I'd say, yeah, it's, you know, it doesn't really matter where you did your flight training, as long as your standard is good, you generally have the same opportunities as everyone else. So just following on from your video, how much help do you think using flight sim before the course would be to practice procedures, etc.? Yeah, great question, Joe. It's absolutely invaluable, flight sim, to practice your stuff. And with flight sim, it allows you to almost cheat, because you can pre-fly what you're going to do. You know, you can look at the weather for the following day and make an assessment of what the winds are going to be, of what the conditions are going to be like, figure out which runway you're going to be on, and you know obviously which procedures you'd fly. So you can then get into the almost, yeah, it sounds, I don't want to encourage bad habits, but you can almost memorize the plate off by heart. And I remember during my IR, which one was quite a tight one, Doncaster in a certain direction, if you're flying the NDB approach, when you turn finals, you're only like 5.5 miles or 6 miles from the runway. And it's just a procedure turn. So you go beacon outbound, come back in on the procedure turn. But if you hadn't started configuring the aircraft as you went outbound, when you turned in, you left yourself a massive amount of work to do, and it was quite difficult to get stabilized basically and try and get established on the inbound course. So the nice thing of flight sim is, right, you could have a go, you know, going beacon outbound, put your gear down, start getting your flaps down, slow it down. So once you turn finals, all the work was done. And the nice thing also about flight sim is, you know, all the what you can get in your head what the headings are going to be roughly. You can get in your head what the platform heights are going to be roughly. So you're well ahead of the game, and you can also practice your checks. So when you get into the aircraft, and the aircraft's fairly expensive. When you're in a twin, you're looking about what, 350 pounds to about 550 pounds just an hour, just depending on what you're flying. So, you know, you just think, oh, if I have to do an extra hour or something, gosh, that's quite expensive. So you definitely want to try and do as much as you can on there. There's some great videos on YouTube from other channels that talk about flight sim setup and stuff. So I wasn't going to bother doing one, because there's no way I could get mine anywhere near as professional and as good as those guys have it. And to be honest, I'm still on Flight Sim X, whereas I think everyone else has moved on to X-Plane 11 and with all the add-ons and all this sort of thing. So yeah, hey, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Any new people, feel free to ask any questions you like, and if you're finding this useful, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and of course like the video. So I hope that answers the question on the IR. So what are the things on getting, what are your thoughts on getting class 1 or class 2 medical, if my intentions long-term is to go commercial? Yeah, this is an interesting one and great question, Wayne. So I started off initially just looking at PPL, and that was my aspiration. And I didn't have the cash at the time to pay for class 1, because the class 1 was like 500 quid or something like that, or 550. Whereas the class 2, you didn't have to go to London or the specific centres. You could get that done with most AMEs or certain AMEs. So I just went for the class 2 initially, and I thought, you know, if I take it seriously, I can then upgrade or go back and get a class 1. And that is exactly what I did. What did I learn when getting my class 1? It's not always a slam dunk to get your class 1 medical. They might find certain things that you then need to get investigated later on. You know, like for me, I'll be totally honest, when I went for my class 1 medical, I don't know what happened, but when I eventually got there and she checked my blood pressure, or the lady, the great AME checked my blood pressure, it was a little bit high. So again, it just need to be looked at. So I then got referred and had to wear a monitor for a certain period. And it came back, yeah, there was absolutely nothing wrong. It was just a random event, you know, that add up in that time. So, but the process from starting the assessment for my class 1 to getting my class 1 in hand took close to about 4 months. So again, you just want to bear this in mind. And also, if you've got an issue, it's better to find out early on with your medical rather than wait until you're really deep and invested in the flight training. And unfortunately, you find there's something that's a hard stop and you cannot fly. You cannot fly commercially. So yeah, I hope that answers that answers that one. So yeah, I guess yeah, if I were you, I'd go as early as possible and get the money for class 1, just so you've got the peace of mind. But yeah, and then just go from there. So Andy, thanks so much for all the no problem. Thanks for tuning in, guys. And yeah, don't forget, if you haven't subscribed, don't forget to subscribe. What's the job like day to day, work-life balance, etc. So doing this stream actually is quite a challenging one at the minute, because obviously we're deep in the COVID-19 crisis, and you simply just have to look at the news to see that pilot jobs are at risk and all the rest. So I feel a bit odd sitting here trying to encourage people or trying to wish them well that flight training is a good thing. But just on that one, I mean, most of you who are starting your flight training, you have got a reasonable amount of lead time before you finish, probably 18 months to 2 years, probably something like that. And hopefully the industry is a very different place. So I do hope it recovers. So just with that, tempering it, day to day is absolutely incredible. I'll describe my day to you based on an early. Let's say we've got a 6 o'clock departure time. I normally try to leave my house 2 hours before the departure time. It just works for me in terms of getting to the car park and so on. And then that puts me at the in the car park about an hour and a half before. So my alarm would have probably gone off around, you know, what, 3:30, 4, something like that, for a 6 o'clock departure. Into the car park, get the car parked, and then walk across to the terminal and staff security. I'm quite lucky. Our car park is fairly close to our crew room. So from the car park, it only takes me about 10 minutes or so to get to security. And most of the time, within 10 minutes, I can be within the crew room. So we're now about an hour and 15, hour and 20 beforehand. I'll normally refine this time just depending on what the day is like and who I'm flying with and what we're doing. So if it's quite a bad, nasty day in terms of weather, and you know, perhaps I'm not overly familiar with where we're going because I haven't been there before, I haven't been there a lot, then I'll try to get there a bit earlier. If I'm pretty comfortable with it, I try and look beforehand before I leave what the weather is, what the NOTAMs are, and it looks like it's going to be pretty straightforward day, then I'll probably cut it a little bit tighter. In my company, and it varies from company to company, the latest report time is 45 minutes before departure, but I try not to get there at minus 46 because you end up just upsetting the captain and the rest of the crew. I try and get there an hour and 10 beforehand. So it's normal in my company anyway that the first officer will get the paperwork. So some company, in certain cases, we're going paperless, but from previously, get all the flight plans, make sure everything's okay, have a look at the NOTAMs, have a look at the weather, check the fuel, or give myself an idea of what kind of fuel I would like to have. And of course, the fuel decision is absolutely the captain's decision, but it's always good, just as a gross error check, if you get yourself approximately, or give yourself an idea of what the fuel is, just because, you know, we're all humans, and, you know, sometimes we can miss something, or, you know, yeah. And then the idea is, once the captain arrives and says, right, just depending on what their style is, they may ask how much fuel would you like if you're flying the sector, or if it's theirs, they might say, right, I'd like this amount, or it's normal discussion. It's just good to have an idea of how much fuel you'd like on there. So once I've done that, the next thing I would get myself ready is all my performance. In my company, it's done on an iPad. So just to save time, once we get onto the aircraft, I'll pre-populate with the weather and the aircraft reg, what our weights are going to be estimated, and so on and so forth. So once we get on the aircraft and the dispatcher finally gives us our load sheet with all the information, it's just a case of refining what I put in the crew room, and it just makes it just a little bit slicker and a bit more efficient. Then at minus 45, we'll normally all get together as the captain and the first officer, have our brief, decide what the day is going to look like, who's going to fly which sectors, and so on and so forth. And then normally the first officer rings through the fuel, so I'll ring through the fuel, figure. I'll then also talk to our handling agent and just let them know what the crew numbers on board and all that sort of thing. Then it's a case of catching up with the cabin crew, having a nice interactive briefing, getting to bond with everyone. And then from there on, it's sharing where the aircraft is and the airfield. Hopefully it's in a nice close stand to the crew room, but sometimes it's a bit of a yomp away, or we have to get a crew bus. And then out to the aircraft, depending on who's flying, if it's pilot flying or pilot monitoring. Pilot flying would normally stay in the flight deck and get the flight deck ready, whereas pilot monitoring would be outside supervising the refueling, doing the walk around, all that sort of thing. And then once the walk around's done, refueling's done, and pilot monitoring will normally come back in. And by that point, pilot flying has sorted out the programming of the FMCs and so on and so forth. And then it's a case of briefing. As we're concluding our briefing, we're normally about 10 or 15 minutes before pushback now. We'll get the figures from the dispatch team of what the final figures are. We'll finalise our performance, do our checks, shut the doors, and yeah, get the clearance for push and start, and off we go. 2 sector day or 4 sector day, it just depends. If it's a long day, if it's a long flight, you normally have just a 2 sector. If it's a fairly short flight, you might have 4 sector day. And yeah, you then just switch roles depending on what the conditions are like during the day, or if there's any limits. Certain airfields are captains only, so again, that would be part of the thought process in terms of picking who flies what, or maybe there's a certain leg I particularly want to fly, whatever. Yeah, and then that's basically it. Hopefully get back or get around ahead of time for most of the destinations, and then yeah, go from there. So yeah, that's near enough what a typical day would look like. Hope that answers that question. Yeah, so Simon, thanks for coming in. Remember, guys, anyone who's come on, great of you to join. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, feel free to subscribe and like the video if you find it useful. So, do you think there will be any COVID-related benefits to aviation in the future, i.e. cheaper training costs with schools if less students go commercial? Yeah, good question, Simon. It's really difficult to tell at the moment what the impact is going to be, and certainly what I'm going to say now is my views and my own views from what I think and what I found. So you know, I'm not representing anybody, I'm not sponsored by anybody. But the very first one is, at the minute, if you look at the oil price is really low. So straight away the fuel prices are lower, or much lower than they were when we went into COVID-19. So you'd expect that to be passed on all the way across the chain, including the training schools, because if the costs are lower, then, if the fuel prices are lower, then hopefully the cost should be lower. In terms of the cheaper training costs, absolutely. You know, everyone needs to make a living, everybody needs to be profitable, but if there's less demand for students, then I would imagine that also then translates to hopefully the prices coming down for flight training. And to be totally honest, I think the smaller schools are really competitive, and you get really good pricing around. Who knows, you may be able to find slightly lower pricing with the larger schools. Who knows what could happen. But hopefully, yeah, everything, I suspect, will probably come down a peg to get that on. Sharon, how are you doing? What's the interview like for the airline you work for, and or any other interviews? So yeah, that's a good question. I'm just having a think. Right, yeah. So I guess for the airline assessments, they tend to be all around the same themes. You'll normally start off when you submit your application, asking all the usual questions. There might be a couple of competency-based questions in there. Describe a time when you did this, why do you want to work for this airline, and so on and so forth. And once you send your application off, you will normally be challenged to do some online testing, just to check your responses and all of that. And yeah, you know, you go through, you do that, and then after you've done your online testing, the airline will then take a look at your paperwork, and if you get above a certain threshold, they'll invite you in, or if there's an opportunity available, they'll invite you in. And then from there, you then go for the actual airline assessment. It's normally split into an HR interview, a technical interview as well, normally with some aircrew, and there's normally a simulator assessment as well. So you get into a simulator, fly a certain profile, and be assessed now. And I'd say they're the three main sort of core areas, and that's pretty consistent across most of the major airlines. Now, other airlines may include a group exercise as well in that. And then from there, after that, you know, after a certain time, depending on the opportunities available, hopefully you get a call or an email saying, yeah, you've been successful. Yeah, and that's typically the format. I'll try and get some video uploaded just talking about airline assessments and what I found and what I learned from them, so hopefully it can help others. Did you lease an aircraft during your hour building to lower costs? That's, yes, sort of. So I did my hour building with A&T in Blackpool, who were absolutely amazing. And with A&T, you could basically buy hour building packages. So if you committed to a block of 10 hours, you got a lower rate. And that's basically what I did to get my hour building done. Now there's many other different ways that you can do it. You can go into a no equity scheme. You can, my good buddies at CAVOK, for example, you can buy hour building packages with them. You can, what else can you do? How else can you do hour building? Oh, you can hour build, for example, at a gliding club, being a tug pilot and so on. So there's quite a few different ways. But yeah, you just kind of have to figure out which situation works best for you, and which kind of is the most effective for what you're doing in terms of location. I guess the main important one that I would like to share is, irrespective of how or which path you decide to go for your hour building, the most important thing is just to make sure that you've got an aircraft available when you want it and when you need it. And as long as you tick that box, then the rest becomes fairly academic. And obviously, all for reasonable cost on that one as well. Hope that answers that question. So, yeah, I'm just trying to scroll down here to see what the other questions are. Hey, Fime, how you doing? How you doing? Yeah, cool. So, some other questions that I had was, how do I improve on the radio and be more confident on the radio? So yeah, I guess on that one, I'll just share some of the things that I did on the radio. I still get not nervous, maybe nervous is not the right word, but now I still struggle at times with the radio because you've got different accents coming across and you can't quite hear them. So some of the things that I used to do on the radio was I used to listen. This is really, really sad, by the way, and I would only recommend this if you're just as sad as me, is I used to listen on an app called Live ATC, and you could tune into any airfield or airport across the globe and just listen to the air traffic. And I used to love, whilst I was doing my work, is just to have like Skipple in the background in the mornings, and then in the afternoons, once JFK and the American Star came online, I used to listen into JFK, and that was pretty good. You just and you just try and piece together in your head what's going on, and that was quite good. It just made all the stuff a little bit more comfortable and a little bit easier just to kind of digest and understand. Keep the questions coming along, guys, and yeah, hi to anyone that's new to the stream. Thanks for joining in. Remember, if you like it, don't forget to like the stream and subscribe to the channel. So yeah, another one here is, where did I do my training? So a few people messaged earlier on, just trying to get an understanding. Typically, guys who are starting maybe their pilot training a little bit later on in their career, and trying to see whether it can work or could not work for them. So I did all my flight training in the UK, most of it concentrated around the north of England. PPL was with Raven Air in Liverpool, and then our building and IMC rating was with A&T in Blackpool, as was my night rating. I did my distance learning with CATS Aviation in Luton, and then went on to my IR. My IR I did in Leeds at PTT. Unfortunately, they've since gone out of business. And I did my CPL at West Air in Blackpool again. That was really, really terrific. Thoroughly enjoyed that. And then I went on to do my MCC course. I did the APS MCC at Virtual Aviation. So yeah, question here from Shane. What did you find hardest about flying? I think the hardest bit for me, everyone finds something hard during their flight training. The hardest bit for me was during the MEIR. I think I just had a lot on my plate going on, and there were a lot of plates spinning because I could only do my training on a weekend. Certain instructors were only available on certain days, and basically I have an IR instruction on a Saturday, and I could only have CPL instruction on a Sunday. So yeah, it was quite a lot to do those two in parallel. But yeah, I found the IR quite challenging. Not so much in terms of the flying. It was just more kind of bringing everything together and getting the execution right. And it was more of a mental one where I put a video up on the IR, but I kind of had to work on myself mentally rather than anything else, just to stop psyching myself out, and just try and get myself to believe that I could actually pass the multi-engine instrument rating. And in the end, I look back now and I'm like, what was I worrying about? There was absolutely no reason to worry. It was completely fine. So the next question for Ali, what is the process of base selection at an airline? So each airline varies, but they tend to be all about the same now. And the process is fairly similar across all of them. So it's normally done on seniority. There's a seniority list. And basically, at a certain stage, either when you first offer the job, or after your type rating, or after your line training, you're then eligible to select which base you want to go and fly from. And that's fairly consistent across most of the low-cost guys. And then based on seniority and the availability of the base that you want, you'll normally be offered that. I was lucky I finished at a time when there were a lot of openings, there was a lot of expansion, so I basically got my first choice for line training. I got my first choice as my permanent base. So yeah, no issues with that. Hope answers that question. Roughly order of study for the ATPL subjects. Yeah, cool, good question. God, I would have to go back and kind of check. Let's see if I can quickly get them on my phone. Bear with me, guys. Whilst I'm looking for this information, guys, thank you to everybody who's signed up and joined this live stream. Remember, if you find the content useful, don't forget to like and subscribe the video. Right, cool, got it for you. So the order of the ATPL subjects, it's normally pretty consistent for a given ATPL ground school vendor. They'll normally have their own module set on a particular way. Now with CATS, the first module is air law, operational procedures, human performance and limitations, MET, and the two COM subjects, VFR and IFR comms. That was my module 1. My module 2, which was more technical module, it was principles of flight, GNAV, mass and balance, performance, flight planning. That made up module 2. And then the final sort of, if you like, more kind of reedy subjects, which is the final module, was systems, radio nav, and aircraft general knowledge and instrumentation. So that's how the modules were made up. I'm using all the free time to pre-course and skim the theory before starting an official course. Yeah, cool, great move. Absolutely. But the one thing I would say is don't get yourself burnt out before you start. It's a long slug, the ATPLs. Mine it takes anywhere from about 6 months to 18 months, just depending on how much time you can allocate to it. But yeah, don't burn out, just enjoy, try and enjoy it and pace yourself is what I'd say to that. Guys, I see quite a few people have joined on. Thank you so much for joining on. Remember, if you find this useful, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. So yeah, good question here. Is a 737 really a big Cessna, as I've heard it described? Absolutely, it is just like a big Cessna, and in fact, the technique for flying an approach is near enough the same technique I used to fly in a PA-28 or whatever. You turn on to final approach, find your landing reference point, keep it then at a certain point in the screen and fly all the way down. No real changes onto that. And yeah, it's a delightful airplane to fly in. Next question, steam gauges or glass cockpit for CPL and IR training aircraft for airline preparation? Honest answer to this is I'd say it would be great if you can do both. I was lucky I was able to do both on both my CPL and IR courses. For my IR, we did the sim time on steam gauges, which is great. And then after you finished your sim, you then went to the DA42 on the G1000 for the IR, and that was super. The only thing is, okay, you don't quite have the same seamless transition from the sim to the aircraft, but the G1000, there's loads of tutorials online. You do a bit of those, and it's fairly intuitive for you to get yourself reading tapes and stuff. And then on the CPL course, initially for the bulk of the CPL course, because to lower the cost, I did it in a PA-28 for the first, I can't remember what the number of hours are. And then for the final 5 hours, I then moved on to the complex aircraft, which was a Saratoga, beautiful airplane. It's basically a six-cylinder, powerful Seneca single engine, and that had glass cockpit. So I got to do both in both cases. It's important, I think, for airline assessment that you can use both. I went to, in fact, two out of my 3 airline assessments. The aircraft was 737 Classic, which was all steam gauges. Okay, it's got the artificial horizon with the speed tape on the side, but other than that, the VSI steam gauge, the altimeter steam gauge, you've got steam gauge ASI. So yeah, it's great if you can fly both. And yeah, it's a really good skill to have. Even now with the Magenta line, when we're flying SIDS, we'd normally set it up so we can back it up in case we have, for example, an FMC failure, and then it could be flown manually. So yeah, you definitely need both. Great question here. What's favorite destination to fly to? I'm hoping I can go back to that destination, and this is not the final, or I haven't flown to that destination for the final time. We'll see what happens after COVID. But it's I love going to Faro. Why do I love Faro? It's just so straightforward. You get to top of descent, you ask for your descent, and you get a clearance straight to platform altitude on the ILS. It's non-restricted descent. Yeah, it's just amazing, and the views. Lisbon as well is amazing as you're flying in there and you see the views. It's great. In terms of the challenge, where do I like flying to for this? Just in terms, the Greek islands tend to be a little bit more challenging, just because on a number of the runways it's non-precision approaches, and in certain cases some of them are even circling approaches. So yeah, I hope that answers that question. How long did it take you from the point you got your wings to when you got your first job? So I was super lucky, actually. I finished my MCC courses, and the longest wait I had was 4 weeks, and that was for the CAEA to issue my license. At the time, there were loads of people applying, and then I think it was around about another month or so afterwards that I got offered the first opportunity. So it didn't take long at all. So yeah, 2 weeks, 2 months. But if you get rid of the 4 week delay for the license, it's probably about 4 weeks. Who knows what's going to happen post-COVID? Hopefully, if in the years to come, the things pick up and it becomes as good again for people joining for the first time. Regarding ATPLs, I've just finished learning Mod 1 content and now need to revise it, get exam ready. Great, nice one, Joe. What's your tip for keeping all the info in at once? So what I used to do is, as I was approaching the exams, so let's say from a module 1 and we have 5 exams, I'll just cycle through each of them, and on the question bank that I was using at the time, and certain question banks have this facility where you can see the average percentage you're getting on each try, on each exam attempt. So I'll do an exam attempt on each of the topics in sequence, and then it'll give a percentage. So it'll say, right, 50% in this, 40% in that, 60% in this, 90% in IFL comms and VFL comms. So then I'll work on the ones that I was getting lower percentages on until those percentages came up to the level that the other ones were. And then I'll just keep refining that until I manage to get all the percentages for each of the exams and modules I was taking up to a really high point. I hope that kind of makes sense. It's different for everybody, and each of you will sort of find your own way to do it. But yeah, I think the important, well, certainly for me when I was revising, is to try and look at each subject at least once every other day, particularly as you're getting close to that point. Do you have a spare GSPRM? No, I don't have a spare jet. I think I gave mine out to a mate for that. How were you taught regarding landing reference? Were you taught to keep the landing reference a third to the screen? Yeah, exactly. It's exactly that one. You just pick your landing reference points. Depending on the aircraft, it will vary slightly. So yeah, but yeah, exactly. Run about a third of the way up the screen. Keep the PAPI there or your reference point, and all the way down. And then yeah, you just fly on that, and that's near enough how we fly the final stages of a visual. Basically, once we've disconnected the automatics and we're in the final 500 feet of the approach. Is it cheaper to go modular route rather than an integrated course? And which do airlines prefer? prefer? Yeah, great question. Guys, I see a few new people signing on. Don't forget, if you like the stream, don't forget to like the video and also subscribe to the channel. So yeah, modular route is certainly cheaper than an integrated course. Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, most people would agree that, yeah, it certainly is. And which type do airlines prefer? The honest answer is, in recent times, airlines have been fairly happy to take most people and cadets from any route. Some airlines, you know, a small minority of them still will only take people from a certain school or what have you. But for the bulk, it's, you know, as long as you've got your training and your training's good, they're happy to take you. Myself, I did modular, and I had no issues with getting a job opportunity. I guess I'll just temper that with the fact that the industry was booming when I finished. Roughly how much did you spend on the entirety of your flight training? Yeah, great question. I did a video on how much on the cost of flight training. Feel free to have a look at that. But yeah, the total figure is 65k pounds. That's how much I spent in total. And I guess I kind of just sort of pitched it. I could have got it for cheaper, but there were just certain compromises I wasn't willing to make, and there's certain things that I decided to purchase. Like I bought myself an A20 headset, I bought myself an iPad with Sky Demon and 4Flight with the jet plates on it, all that sort of thing. You don't really need that. Any exciting, scary flying stories? Oh yeah, there's plenty, but maybe not that I can discuss on here. Trying to think of a good one. Oh yeah, when I was hour building, Ross A&T will remember this one. I hadn't had my night rating yet, and I was just coming back from my CPL qualifying cross country. I did a refueling stop at Halfpenny Green, refueled fine, but then I managed to flood the engine, and it got pretty close to the point where basically I was going to have to abandon the flight, but thankfully, just at the cut-off, managed to get the engine going again, and then flew back, and I think I landed with around about 10 minutes of daylight left. About 10 minutes of the half an hour after whatever it is that was left. So I'd say that was quite a tight, hairy moment. And yeah, the CA show the CA watching. Yeah, you never know who's watching these streams. Guys, thanks so much for tuning in, and yeah, keep asking the questions. Some great questions. If there's anything that you want to ask, feel free to pipe in and chip in. And guys who are new to the stream, don't forget to, if you find it useful, don't forget to like the stream and also subscribe to the channel. So yeah, another question that was asked here is how many hours did I have when I was accepted to the airline? So I had basically the legal minimum, well, not the legal minimum, but I had around about the 200-hour mark, which is what most people tend to have as they finish their flight training, 100 hours P1, and then the rest dual time or whatever. Yeah, and it's just basically that the requirement was. Another question here. Would you like to take command one day? Would you prefer short haul or long haul? Absolutely, I'd love to get my command one day, but you know, there's what I've learned is there is a lot to learn. Flying around in Europe and occasionally Northern Africa within our route network, it's really a lot to learn. And on a good day, it's fine, but when the weather's bad and so on, you're ever so grateful to have somebody who's really experienced that on your left, just to kind of learn from. So I'm quite happy to continue with my apprenticeship, learning for a little while. And yeah, absolutely, one day when I feel ready and hopefully the opportunity arises, would absolutely love to do that. Would I prefer short haul or long haul? I'm absolutely loving short haul life. I'm hoping I can continue with the short haul life after COVID-19. With all the uncertainty, you never know what can happen. But yeah, for now, super happy with short haul. The other thing is, in my old job, I used to travel at times quite a bit, and yeah, I think the whole going to different places and staying in hotels, yeah, I'm kind of done with that. So yeah, pretty happy short haul. Yeah, thanks, Levy. Knowing what you know, is there anything major that you would have done differently in my training? I guess the answer to that, this is one that I would probably say is, I just kind of asked myself, I wish I'd probably got involved a little bit sooner. But who knows? You know, starting sooner, maybe the opportunities for work would not have been there, so I may have been frustrated on the other end when I finished and fallen out of it. I don't know. And also the nice thing for me is I had been working for around about 11 years as a chartered engineer. So you get to a certain level, earning or salary level, which definitely helped to be able to pay for the training and so on and so forth. So maybe, doing it earlier, I wouldn't have had the money to be able to do it. But yeah, I'd say if there's one thing I could change, maybe a little bit sooner, but fine. It is what it is. How was my first solo flight? My very first solo flight was in the Air Cadets. I think I was about 16 at the time. And when you're flying, and it was in gliders, and when you're flying gliders and you go from 2 to 1, the weight change is quite significant. So I just remember thinking it was winch launch. So you go 0 to 60 in like 2.5 seconds or something daft like that. I remember thinking, wow, this is quick. And then you're just so focused on flying the winch, looking out for engine failure, disconnect off the winch. And then when I made my first turn back pointing towards the airfield, and I looked back and there was nobody sat there and it was quiet, I was like, oh goodness, I am flying this on my own. But yeah, it's just a nice level of joy. And then you're back straight into the circuit and you're concentrating about getting the aircraft in the right place at the right height, ready to do your circuit, and then you're straight into your pre-landing checks and so on and so forth. So then the training just kicks in. It kind of goes as a blur. In terms of solo for the first powered flight, that was let's say soon after my 18th birthday. That was with Tayside Aviation in Dundee. And again, the instructor got out and said off you go. And then where I remember being quite sort of a key moment was when I picked my checklist and I wanted to put it away, and I just put it on the seat next to me, which was empty. And I remember thinking, oh yeah, the instructor's not here, I'm on my own. So yeah, but other than that, it was fine. But yeah, you don't get that much time to really think about it when you're flying, just because it all happens so quickly. And you've got all the procedures and processes and stuff, like your after takeoff checks, and then you're doing your downwind checks, and then you're making a radio call, and then you're turning base leg, and then you're taking the power off, and then you're starting to get your flaps out, and then before you know it, you're turning finals, you're reporting finals, you get your landing clearance, you land, and then your first solo is that. Another question in relation to any question. Have you got family or kids? Not any kids, just a long-term girlfriend. I was super lucky when I was doing my flight training that she was really patient, and in effect, I kind of said goodbye to her for about 12 months, despite us living in the same place. I mean, I just wasn't available to go out. Occasionally I would, if it was a birthday or something, but for the bulk of the time, because it was just impossible. You couldn't go out on a Friday night and expect to go flying or outbuilding on a Saturday, and it was just absolutely impossible. So yeah, you just have to head down. I remember what I did look is if there was a particularly poor forecast over the weekend, then that was a good night to go and let off some steam. But other than that, now it's relatively focused and continuing on there. Would you ever want to fly freight? Well, I think any pilot at the minute can't be fussy. You take whatever opportunity comes. If unfortunately you find yourself in a situation where you're unemployed, what is your dream airline? Good question. I'm pretty happy with mine at the minute, to be honest. I guess I'm still in the honeymoon phase where everything is just absolutely amazing. Ask me again maybe in 5 years' time after I've got maybe a few thousand hours under my belt. Did solo at Dundee. What was your instructor? Might know them. I can message you offline for that one. My poor instructor might not want to be mentioned on a YouTube stream for the whole wide world to hear. Guys, thanks so much for joining, and anyone who's new to the stream, again, please keep the questions coming, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you like what you see. Now the next question is, how long have I been flying? Pretty when did I first start? First started flying in the Air Cadets, sort of early teens, 14, 15 for air experience flights. And any of you guys who know people want to become pilots who are maybe a little bit younger, encourage them to join the Air Cadets if they have that option, because there's a lot of free flying there. And I got my first 12 hours completely free via the Air Cadets, and even went solo via the Air Cadets again. So yeah, that was super, super good. So yeah, solid 15, 16 years, something like that. The great thing of modular is there is absolutely no rush. It took me from getting my PPL to flying commercially for the first time. it was what, more than 10 years. So yeah, just take your time. And you know, within that 10-year period, God, the industry changed a huge amount. It went from amazing to being really bad, to being amazing, to being really bad, to being amazing, and then now it's really bad again. So another question here: favorite hour building trip in the north of England? Where did I love going? Love going to Duxford. Duxford's amazing, just because it's a museum, and I used to go to Duxford as a youngster, watch the air shows, and it was pretty cool to be able to actually fly in there. When I used to go and watch the Red Hours do their thing. Obviously not on a display day. I like going north to Scotland, Inverness, for the high ground when it's covered in snow is really, really amazing. Dundee is pretty cool, crossing the Firth of Forth, going that way as well. I always wanted to go to Oban, but when I went, it was in the winter and I was running out of daylight, and word was the runway had ice on it, so I didn't bother going. So I'd love to give Oban a go. Yeah, that's basically it. Yeah, no, great question. Great point on that for the cadets and UAS. Thanks for that. Do you know anything about pilots within OML on their medical? Yes, but I don't know enough about it to be able to comment on that one. I don't want to give wrong information out to the group, so I'll just pass on that one if that's okay. Another question here is APS worth it? There's been a bit discussion about, you know, which MCC course do you do? Do you just do the bare minimum, or do you do slightly, you know, premium one? For me, I thought the APS was absolutely incredible. It was almost like doing a mini type rating, and definitely helped me during airline assessment, and then it helped me 100% during the type rating. It just kind of took the risk away, because I'd seen a lot of the stuff that we did on the type rating, maybe not quite to the same depth as we did on the type rating, but I'd seen a lot of it already during the APS MCC on that one. Guys, thank you so much for watching the stream. Guys, any more questions? Please keep them coming. If you're new to the stream and have just recently signed on, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you are. How long do you think it will take for the airlines to recover from the COVID situation? Yeah, good one. The truth of the answer is I have no idea. I'm optimistic, you know, as with most of the stuff you're seeing in the media. I think people will start to, you know, start flying at a reduced rate, probably in the, you know, June, July time, something like that. And I guess the expectation is it probably won't pick up for another 12, 18 months, if not more. But who knows? You know, if somebody predicted or said this was going to happen in January, though nobody flying would all be effectively under COVID house arrest, you'd have phoned an ambulance for them. So, you know, we can only hope for and pray for a miracle of some sort that hopes that suddenly somehow things pick up and we're back. But yeah, we never know. So yeah, would that mean you are limited for when applying for a job? Yeah, good question. So on the VA product, I don't want to comment for them. I'm sure if you message them, they'll be, you know, completely cool to go through it with you. But just because you do that, an airline tailored MCC course does not restrict you to doing other, to being able to apply for other companies. I guess the whole point, or one of the points of doing a particular airline's MCC course is it gives you, if you like, a queue jump or priority ticket to getting assessment and potentially even a job. It's almost like a pre-selection for the job, but absolutely not. It's you still keep your APS MCC qualification. So if things don't work out with them, you certainly have the opportunity to go elsewhere. What's my favorite aircraft? I'm a massive geek, so it has to be the 777. Most difficult subjects you found in ATPLs, and what did you do to understand them better? I remember when I was doing flight planning and GNAV, and you get through the material and you start working through the question bank, and you do, you know, you set up a practice exam, and you only get through like a quarter of the exam in the 2 hours allocated. And out of those questions, you only get like a quarter of them right. And I remember thinking to myself, how in the world am I going to be able to pass this? But the truth is, it just becomes match fitness. You just practice and practice and practice and practice. And then as time progresses, You don't have to go back to look up the formula because you've memorized it. It doesn't take you quite so long to plot on the map because you're becoming quicker at reading the references and getting to the grids. You're becoming a bit quicker, and then suddenly, I remember you know on flight planning you do an exam in the allocated time, and that was like a big eureka moment for me. Yeah, you get through the 2 hours or hour and a half, whatever's allocated, and you manage to do all the questions, and you think, brilliant. You may not score particularly well, but you think, right, it's actually possible, physically possible to finish it. And then you go back, you refine again, and then now you start scoring 60% in an exam. You're thinking, right, we're nearly there. And then you do a bit more, and then you're scoring 70, 80, 90, 95, and then you feel absolutely ready. So it's just a case of practice, and go for it. Most difficult, it's more the content, not so much the technical difficulty. It's the content and the method, and almost getting yourself to the point where you almost don't have to think about what's being asked. It's at your fingertips so much that you can immediately just go for it, and you know exactly what they're asking for. So it's just practice and doing the question banks. Certainly you can't just get through with just the question bank, but if you do both, do the question banks and then also do go through the material well, and then keep complementing each other. It's great. Most difficult. So I hope that answers the question. Are you doing anything to keep your skills whilst not flying? Yeah, good question. I dabbled a little. I did a video actually on FSX in the PDMG. So yeah, a little bit of flight sim, but I have to admit my computer is not the greatest. Yeah, and unless you've got the latest, most up-to-date information, yeah, it's difficult to kind of get the performance from the newer flight sims. But that's that. Guys, thank you so much to everyone who's come on to the stream this evening. Great to have the questions. Great to have a good discussion. Don't forget, if you found the video helpful, don't forget to like the stream and subscribe to the channel. It looks like that's near enough it for me. I said I'll do around about an hour, something like that. So I am just going to wrap up here unless anyone else has got any more questions. Stay tuned for the channel. I'll be following on with more videos next week. Thanks once again, everyone. All the best. Cheers.